Hello, my amazing Algebra Half students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And today we're going to be working on 110 in addition 2 and 108 in addition 3. And we're talking about complex decimal numbers and fractional percents. And today's kind of a special day. A lot of you are homeschoolers, and you are using this channel because you are homeschooled. And today is the first lesson I've done after the whole coronavirus has descended upon us, and almost all students your age are going home and having to do school at home. So you have a lot of company right now in your homeschooling because everybody is having to learn at home until this coronavirus lifts. And so we just need to be patient with each other and be as content as we can in the current situation. Try to obey the restrictions that maybe to you don't make sense, but to those that are trying to keep this virus in check, it is necessary. So as much as you maybe don't like doing school at home right now, those of you that are joining because of the coronavirus, try to be content. God tells us that we need to be content. In all things that I have to do, I need to be content. And sometimes it takes more work than others, but I'm going to try to make this as much fun for you as I can. And hopefully, if you have questions, you will use the messaging on the YouTube and send me a message, and I will try to get back to you and help you with whatever I can help you with. So, here we go. So, this is something you don't see a lot, but what happens when you see something like 0.03 and a half? Okay, we got a fraction inside a decimal, which is not a good form. Okay, so we're not saying that this is the way you should see it, but when you do, what do you do with it? Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is if we just see a 1/2, that means the 1/2 is in the ones place, and it's 1/2 of 1. And 1/2 of 1 is the same thing as 0.5 as a decimal, because 0.5 is the same as 5/10 because that's the tenths place, which is 1/2. Okay, so if we see 0.03 and a half, which is what we started with, then that means the 3, which starts this complex decimal number, the 3 is in the hundredths place. So we treat the whole 3.5 as hundredths. So we have 3.5 hundredths, which will be written as 0.035. Okay, so 3.5 hundredths would be 35 thousandths, and we get 0.035. So like I said, you won't see a lot of that, but this is what we do when we do see something like that. We'll do some examples and practices with that. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and skip a little bit and go straight to some practices. This is your first practice, and since they didn't have very many, I went ahead and made another little practice for us. So we're just doing our practice for these first. Write 0.00046 and a fifth as a decimal without a fraction. So first, let's look at that 1/5. 1/5 is equal to 2/10. So if we were going to express 1/5 as a decimal, we would use 0.2. Okay, so all we really have to do in this is take the 1/5 wherever it is and change it to a 2, because the 0.2 was in the tenths place, but this is way down here. All we have to do is put a 2. That's it. All right, so the answer is going to be 0.000462, which is the same thing as a 1/5 there because of the 2/10. Now, when we're looking at it, we'll go ahead and put the 1/5 back there for a second. Okay, when we're looking at it, it is, if we were going to name it, the 46 ends in the tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths place. So we would read that as 46 1/5 100,000ths. Okay, if we were going to read it as a verbally as a number, and when we write it as a decimal, okay, then we would say that it is tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, 1,000,000ths. Okay, and 1,000,000ths is a what? It's a millionths. So we would say 462 millionths. That's pretty tiny, isn't it? All right. So we would correct that. Once we write it as a decimal, we would say 462 millionths instead of 46 100,000ths, 46 1/5 100,000ths. So when we change it to a decimal, we would move that one over because now the last decimal place is here. But 46 1/5 100,000ths is the same as 462 millions. They're the same. Okay, so like I said, you won't see a whole bunch of this, but we want to know what to do with it when we do see it. All right, so now here we have 1/4. Well, we know that 1/4 is the same as 0.25 as a decimal. So what do we have to do? We take off the 1/4 and we put a 25 because the decimal over here is not going to change. Okay, so now how would we read our original number? We would have said 59 1/4 tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths. So we would have said 59 1/4 millionths. But now how do we read that? Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths, 10 millionths, 100 millionths. So we would read the number now as 5,925 100 millionths. Wow, that's a mouthful. Okay, so now we're working on fractional percents and turning them into decimal numbers. So here we have 4 2/5%. Well, the way I like to do it is go ahead and take care of the 4 2/5 and put it into a decimal form first, and then to take care of your percent, you just move your decimal 2 places backwards. Okay, so 4 2/5. Now 2/5 we know is the same as 4/10. Okay, so it's easier to turn it into a decimal if you first put it under over 10. So take the 2/5, make it 4/10. So now this is 4.4, because 4/10 is a 0.4%. Okay, so now that we have 4.4%, let's put a little. So then we know that the percent sign moves my decimal 2 places to the left. So this is going to be what? 1, 2. What happens when I go past it? I fill it in with zeros, right? So my decimal was here, and now it's moving 1, 2 places to the left, and the correct decimal would be 0.044. So now let's do the same thing over here with this one. It is already in a complex decimal number. It's got a decimal but also a fraction, which is not the best form. But 1/8 is what? 1/8 is 0.125. Now, if you don't remember that and you're kind of stuck, you can divide 1 divided by 8. Remember, we need to put a decimal and a 10. That's going to go decimal. Our decimal goes right above. That's going to go 1 times 8 is 8. 2, and then we bring down the 0. 8 into 20 is going to go 2 times for the 16. 2 times 8 is 16. I subtract the 20 and the 16, I get 4. I bring down the 0, I get 40. 8 into 40 is the 5. Okay, so if you don't remember how that's 0.125, you can long divide it and you will get there. All right, so 1/8 is 0.125. So now that we know that, can't we take our 0.7 and 1/8 and turn it into a decimal? So we're going to leave the percent on for right now. So remember, nothing changes with the decimal, but we tack on, instead of 1/8, we tack on 125. So it's going to be 0.7125%. And lastly, we take that percent, which means divided by 100, and we move that decimal 2 places to the left. Now, when we move that decimal 2 more places to the left, then what's going to happen? We're going to have 1, 2. The decimal will go here, and aren't we going to have to fill in with zeros? So our final answer, got to take that off now that we move the decimal. So 0.007125, which, if we were to read it, is 7,125 what? Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, millionths. Okay, because that's thousandths is a millionth. All right, so 7,125 millionths. Okay, so here is our practice. Complete the boxes, fraction, decimal, percent, and they give both of our numbers in percent form. Okay, so what are we going to have to do first? Let's look at 0.06 and 2/5%. So we know that this is 6 2/5 hundredths%. All right, so let's deal first with the 2/5. Okay, so 2/5 is the same thing as 4/10, which is 0.4. Okay, so since it's way over here, isn't that just going to change? The 2/5 is just going to turn into a 4. Okay, so now we have 64,000ths%, and the percent is going to tell us to what? Move our decimal 2 places to the left. So let's put that over here. Now 2 places to the left is going to make it necessary for us to fill in with zeros, isn't it? So here was my 0.064, and there was my decimal, but now it's going to go 2 places to the left, and that will be the decimal equivalent, which is 64 tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, 6,400,000ths. Okay, so now how do I turn that into a fraction? Is I'm going to put 64, right? Every time, this one would be tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths. So 100 thousandths, okay, and then 64 on the top. Okay, so we know that this one gives us 1 0, 2 zeros, 3 zeros, 4 zeros, 5 zeros, 5 zeros. 64 hundred thousandths. All right, so now 7 1/5%. Now we know that 1/5 is the same thing as 2/10, which is the same thing as 0.2, right? So now I can change the 1/5. Since I don't have a decimal here, it's going to be 0.2. So 7.2 is what we're trying to change. And now we're going to take the 7.2% and turn it into a decimal, which means I'm going to move this 2 places to the left and have to fill in with a 0. So this was my original decimal right here between the 7 and the 2. And then I move 2 places to the left because of the percent. So my decimal is 0.072. Okay, and then we're turning this decimal into a fraction, which is going to be 72 and then a 0, 0, 0. And let's check it. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths, and that's correct. So, could both of these fractions be simplified? We've got them in a fractional form, but should we simplify a fraction? We should, shouldn't we? Okay, so 64 divides by 2, and so does 100,000. So that would be 32, and that would be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so 100,000 cuts in half to 50,000. I don't know if you can see that. All right, and then, well, I decided I'd better get a new board just for that simplification. So 64 over 100,000 is 32 over 50,000 is 16 over 25,000 is 8 over 125. 12,500 is 4 over 6,250 is 2 over 3,125, and that is the most simplified we can get that first fraction. Then I did the second one for you. That was 72 over 1,000 is 36 over 500 is 18 over 250 is 9 over 125. So our final problem, this was our practice. These were the percents we decided to simplify them to. Remember, that was 2/5 there, and that was 1/5 there. Okay, and then we wrote them in the decimal form, and then we simplified the fraction forms all the way down. So that is the answer for your practice problem. That was quite a long one, wasn't it? But it's not hard. It just needs you a little bit of work, and especially simplifying those fractions. This is Mrs. A, and you are done with your lesson. May God bless your day.